Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. Today's video is all about maybe 10 mistakes people make when starting seeds indoors for their garden transplant. So I want to go over those, and if you know the mistakes, that's going to help you out in the long run. Let's start with lighting. A lot of mistakes are made with lighting. People think that you can start, these are tomatoes and peppers right here, that you can start them in a sunny window. You can't. You have to have bright, intense light really close to where the seeds are germinating to have short, stocky, strong plants. If you put them on a windowsill, it's not enough sunlight. It looks bright to you and me, but it's not enough for your plants. The plants will get really tall and leggy and flop over. They're going to look skinny. They're just going to look bad. The other mistake people make is they don't put their grow lights close enough to the seed starting mix. And sometimes it varies a little bit. This is, about an inch. Generally speaking, and the lights vary a little bit on intensity, so start with your lights about 2 inches above the seed starting mix. That's 5 centimeters. And in the beginning, when a seed first germinates and breaks the surface, like you can see a couple coming up right there, that first 7 to 10 days of really intense light is most important, so they get the signal not to stretch and become lanky. As the plants grow over the weeks, you can actually raise the lights because the plants are going to get bigger and a little bit less dependent on the light. So you really want to start with the lights close enough to the seed starting mix for that first 7 to 10 days so the plants are nice and stocky, like that tomato plant right back there. It looks great. The other thing people do, and it's okay if you got the budget, they overspend on buying specialized grow lights with different color LED lights. You can do that. They're more expensive and the plants tend to do a little bit better. It's true. However, I've been growing with white LED lights for a decade. Those are white LED lights. I have a video on this set right here. I will link it in the video description. It works. I've been doing it. There's other values to worry about with the lights, but the values that you want to work on when you're using the white LED lights, the shop lights, is you want at least 5,000 lumens or brighter, and you want to be around 5100 Kelvin. That gives the lights the right brightness and color to have beautiful transplants. This is rosemary right here. And again, the white LEDs work really, really well. The next thing I think people make a mistake with is they go too large. You only need one level to get started. That's a lot of plants going all the way across. So don't overdo it. Don't buy a shelving system, 5 lights, 8 lights, whatever, and overwhelm yourself. Just start simple. For the first year, you just want to take care of a flat. Will go in this way. You can use foil trays. I'll be talking about that. Another flat would fit in there, and you can grow a lot of transplants, save yourself a lot of money. So number 2, don't overdo it. Start small. If you like it, if you enjoy it, then you can kind of work yourself up to a bigger grow light station, and you can do more. If you want to learn more about growing plants indoors, follow me. Starting January 1st, I will be growing cool weather crops, warm weather crops, herbs, flowers, vegetables indoors, and I will teach you how to do that. So don't get overwhelmed. Don't start too big. Set the lights to the right distance. And for instance, if you have the lights too close to start and maybe the leaves get a little brown, just raise the lights. But start with the lights closer than you might think. You want them to be nice, stocky, and strong. The other thing people do is they tend to overwater the plants and to keep the plants saturated too long. I have extensive videos on this from the years. You want your seed starting mix to become a nice light brown on top. This is dried. Seed starting mix always dries from the top down. That means there's plenty of moisture right down here. The seeds down here were just watered, where the seed starts, and you can see how the soil's a nice dark brown. You want the top to dry to a light color, and then maybe 1 to 2 days, even 3 days. When the plants are small, you can wait 3 days. When they're large, you have to do it a little bit sooner. Then you water your plants. You want to give them a period of letting the top dry out, so you reduce the risk of fungus and molds growing on your seed starting mix. Some of them can be problematic. It also reduces the chances of fungus gnats multiplying. I'll be talking about that shortly. So you want to give the seed starts a chance to really dry out, and you can see how this is drier. And then here's when it was just watered. It's a little bit darker. You always want to bottom water your seed starts. You don't want to have a watering can and be watering from up here. Splashes water everywhere. It can move fungus and mold issues around. It's just a mess, and you're dealing with electricity. Always bottom water. So all my trays sit in another tray so that I can just pull them out, lift up the cell, and then always water from the bottom. It's so much easier. Fill it to about, I don't know, a quarter of the way. Put your cell back in. In about 20 to 30 minutes, the water should wick up. Everything should be nice and dark brown. If it's not, and there's no more water in the tray, add a little bit more water. You can see the contrast here. Like this cell didn't get fully saturated. See how it's that lighter color that I was talking about? There's still going to be water in the bottom of the cell, so the plants are going to be okay. So if it's not to that nice dark brown, add a little bit more water. After 30 minutes, if you have a lot of water sitting in there, go ahead and dump that out into the toilet or someplace and get rid of it. You don't want the plants to sit oversaturated in the soil. It's just not good for them in the long run, especially when they're small. When they're larger, you can get away with leaving some water in the bottom. With practice, you get pretty good at estimating how much water has to go in there, so you don't typically have a lot remaining behind that you have to go and dump and get rid of it. Another mistake people make is they overspend on buying the starting trays, these little cells. And if you have the budget and you want to buy, thicker, stronger plastic, you can go ahead and do that. But these are the basic plastic cells and inserts, flats. I sell them at my seed shop. They last forever, unless you stomp on them, you're not going to have an issue. If that maybe is too expensive, you can find foil baking trays. You can grow that way. I'm doing a series on what you see right here versus growing in the cells. You can repurpose water bottles. You can grow in those. So there's a lot of ways that you can save money. And you always want the setup to be something like this. A flat that's going to hold the water, the cell or the container that has holes in the bottom. These water bottles have holes in the bottom, and you would just fill right here to water the plastic bottles. You could use yogurt cups, you could use cottage cheese cups, anything like that. And then for this setup, you water into that tray on the bottom, set this tray on top. It has holes in the bottom, and the water will saturate the seed starting mix. This keeps it really simple for lighting, for the growing, and for the watering. The next mistake people make is they tend to overplant. If you're only going to put 6 peppers into your garden, if you only have the space for 6 peppers, then you really don't want to grow more than, let's say, 9. You grow an extra 3 for backup plants in case something doesn't germinate or something goes wrong. So don't overplant. These are all nice and small, but they're going to have to be potted up. There's probably 24 tomato plants back there, 24 pepper plants. They're all contained right there. But as they get to be 3 inches, 7.5 centimeters taller, they're going to have to get moved around. They're going to be closer to the lights. I'm going to have to raise the lights a little bit. So you want to have an idea of what you want to grow. It's real easy. Maybe you just need 3 rosemary plants. However, I have 4 cells set up. It's real easy to overplant, and then you're not going to have the room to grow indoors because the crops are going to take up the space. Now, timing is another mistake people make where they're letting the pepper plants or the tomato plants, they're starting them maybe 8, 10, 12 weeks early before they're ready to go out into the ground. That's a real common mistake, that people start their plants at the wrong time. Now that's hard to cover, in this specific video, so please subscribe. I go over that in detail, and I just did a couple videos on helping you figure out timing with your seed starts. I would recommend watching those. I will put them in the video description. So generally speaking, you have your cool weather crops that like the cooler temperatures. You start those first, and then you start the warm weather crops like tomatoes and peppers. And you might be wondering, why am I doing this now? These are all video props, so it's way too early for me to be starting any of this. So you want to get the timing down so that you're starting your cool weather crops like kale, lettuce, spinach, broccoli first. They get moved from under the grow lights, and then you put in your tomatoes, your peppers, zucchini, squash, cucumbers possibly, so that you are kind of like have an assembly line. Like everything gets started at the right time, gets moved to the outdoors at the right time, and then the next wave of plants come in. So timing really makes a difference. Another mistake people make is with fertilizing. They tend to under-fertilize or over-fertilize. And if you're going to make a mistake, under-fertilizing is the best because you can always add more. You can't really reduce the amount of fertilizer you over-concentrate in seed starting mix. And keep in mind that the fertilizer is just being concentrated into these little cells. So if you put in too much, it's going to be a problem. How do you get around that? In the simplest way is use any water-soluble fertilizer. The chemical types are fine. You can use fish emulsion, but that does smell. I recommend AgroThrive. That's an organic water-soluble. It has less odor. I like that. And you want to use them at a reduced amount, half strength, quarter strength, depending on which one you're using. And you just add it into your water when you do the watering like I showed you. And maybe you do that every other watering after the plant's been growing 7 to 10 days. They originally live off the seed coat. There's a little bit of nutrients in your seed starting mix, not much. And then, you start with the water-soluble fertilizers at a reduced amount, and it's, just about every other watering. When the plants get larger, they're going to need more. When they're smaller, they don't need as much. If the plant leaves look a little bit yellow or they don't look like they're taking off, just add in a little bit more fertilizer. You do have to, adjust the strength based on the strength of the fertilizer that you buy. But the idea is that you want to use a reduced amount to begin with. Don't over-fertilize your plants. One of the biggest problems with seed starting mix, if you're buying a seed starting mix, any of them work. You can buy a potting mix. One of the biggest issues is a lot of times they have fungus gnats in them. They have eggs, and those eggs can last for a long time in the store-bought bags of starting mix. So when you put your starting mix or your potting mix into a container, it's usually more dry. Hydrate it with boiling water. That will kill off a lot of the fungus gnat eggs, if not all of them. And just let it dry, an hour or so, of course. And then go ahead and use it. By sterilizing your soil ahead of time with boiling water, you're really going to do yourself a favor, because if you get fungus gnats, they're hard to get rid of. There are ways to do that. You don't need soil life in your seed starting mix. You're just growing transplants. When you take them outside, you get them in the ground, all the good microbes, all the good life in the soil is there, and it's good to go. So I recommend boiling water in your seed starting mix. And again, I have many videos on that. Just search my channel. To sterilize the mix, reduce the risk of fungus gnats. It also will kill off usually any kind of fungus or molds that could be an issue. And if you just see like algae, green algae on your seed starts, on the starting mix of your seed starts, that's nothing to worry about. All fungus and all molds are not necessarily problematic. And you might notice here the lights are much higher than I explained earlier in the video. These plants have been growing for many weeks, so again, the lights don't have to be as close. You can set your lights up. This is not really a mistake, but this is just, once you know it, it turns on a light in your brain. You can set your grow lights all the way to the top of the space that you have on your shelf. And then rather than lowering the lights, like, when you're first starting seed, you lower them, close to the seed starting mix, and then you raise them as they grow. That's a pain to get in there and move the change. You can just use books. You can use styrofoam from packaging, anything to raise the tray closer to the lights, and as the plants get bigger, you move the flat down to, the shelving, and this way you're not always messing and adjusting the light, which is kind of a pain to do. How long do you leave the lights on? People make a mistake with that. The answer is 16 hours. Maybe when you first get the seeds into the starting mix, you want more light then. You can reduce it to 12 hours. To keep it simple, you could do 14 hours on, 10 hours off, and I recommend using a timer. A timer is a lifesaver. You don't want to have your plants germinate and the light doesn't go on at the scheduled time because you forget to turn on the switch. In a couple of hours after germination, if these plants aren't getting enough light, they start to stretch out, thinking they're still in the soil, breaking through the dark soil, looking for the light. So you want to have your lights on a nice schedule that's automated. So I recommend 14 hours on, 10 hours off, and it's going to make a big difference. If you miss again, flicking the lights on at the right time or off, it causes a problem for your plants. Why not automate it with a timer? You don't have to worry about it. Another mistake people make is they grow some of their plants that are growing 6, 8, 10 weeks indoors too long in the small cells. The pepper plants will fill up the space right here in about 4 weeks or so from breaking the surface. They're going to need to be potted up, and that's fine. You can do that. Or you can start them in larger cells like this, and they can stay in there for the full 8 weeks or 10 weeks that you're growing them as transplants. And I sell these larger cells at my seed shop along with everything you see right here. It's up to you what you want to pick. You could start a tomato plant, you know, this one is starting to hit the lights. In something like this, you're not going to have to up pot that plant. Or you can start them in the smaller cells back there. Again, you're going to have to up pot. The idea is as your plants are growing, you can pop them out, and if the roots are coiling at the bottom, or you see the roots have filled up that whole space, they're really going to need to be potted up into larger containers. The worst thing that you want to do is have little tiny root systems that are all bound up, big upper growth, and then you put them outside and they don't have a root system that's big enough to really help them take off as transplants. So you want to kind of match container size to a good root size so that you have transplants that are really healthy when they go out, and as soon as they hit the right soil temperature, they get the warmth of the sun, they take off, and they get large really quickly. Because the goal of transplants is to have bigger plants sooner and get a harvest sooner to your table. And the final mistake goes along with timing, when you get things started. Plants need to be in the right soil temperature. That means when you plant them into the earth, that soil temperature has to be at a temperature the plants prefer. Like tomatoes and peppers really want to go into soil outside, that top 2-4 inches. That's about 65 degrees Fahrenheit, 18.3 degrees Celsius. Starting your peppers, your tomatoes, your warm crops early indoors, getting them to the size you want, and then transplanting them into cold soil really doesn't do anything for you. The plants are just going to sit there. They can turn color. Tomatoes can turn purple. They literally kind of just shiver and they wait for the warmth of the soil to get to the right temperature. So in your planning, you want to know what your soil temperature is so that you can time, say you want to get your tomato plants into the earth May 1st here in Maryland. When the soil is the right temperature, you want to grow them 6 weeks indoors. So you count back 6-7 weeks from May 1st. That's when you would start your tomato plants. And that's going to make sure they mature inside to the right size you want, and then they get out into the earth at the right temperature. And I just did a video on that if you want to check out that video. That will really help a lot. That's, it's kind of a visually unstunning video, but it really explains the importance of soil temperature for your crops, which sort of dictates how you start your seeds indoors. So it's really, really important. This is probably the most important tip. All these seed starts look really good, and the tips that I gave you will help you have a better experience. Maybe you do some of them, you make a couple mistakes, you do other things perfectly. No matter what you have growing indoors, these plants are not used to the sun. They're not used to the UV rays from being outside and getting hit by the sun. Those UV rays can damage and kill off your plants. So these plants really don't know what the sun is. They're used to growing under the LED lights. You have to slowly transition all of these outdoors over about a week's time. I have videos on that, and really introduce them to the sun and the UV rays. So you want to do maybe 15-30 minutes the first day, 30 minutes, a little bit longer the next day. Put them out on a cloudy day. The bottom line is you have to spend about a week getting all your indoor seed starts acclimated to the sun, the UV rays of the sun. If not, the sun is going to basically burn the leaves, and it can kill the plants if the sun damages the stems. So make sure no matter what you do, you slowly transition and get your seed starts, your transplants, used to the sun. Thanks so much for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com, and please check out my blog at therustedgardenblog.com. I will be putting posts in that match the videos I do each week. So shortly I'll have a video on mistakes people make when starting seeds indoors, and sometimes it's a little bit easier to check out the blog, see the list of materials or the list of things I'm talking about in a blog post. Again, thanks so much for watching. And if you're going to start seeds indoors this year, please follow me. I'll be doing a whole series starting January 1st in 2025. Thanks for watching.